We're literally a month away from the Chicago Bears' first preseason game. And while Matt Eberflus hasn't explicitly said how much they're going to play their starters, we can look to the last couple of years to get a better sense of what we can expect for Caleb Williams and some of the other veterans on the roster as well.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On the show today, we look at what the plan might be for these Chicago Bears during the preseason. With an extra preseason game and a rookie quarterback, it's a little bit more complicated than years past when like last year, for example, you had Fields and Getsy. Year two together, everything was a little bit more established. A lot of change this offseason, a new offensive and defensive coordinator as well. We'll try and piece together what we can expect for Caleb and the other rookies, some of the veterans, and whether or not they'll take the field at all during the preseason, and which young players really should be playing the most that we can expect to see quite a bit of across the 4 preseason games. But I think the most interesting question here is about the quarterback spot, Caleb Williams. How much will he play in the preseason? Because on the one hand, he's a rookie coming in the NFL for the first time, learning a new offense, learning his teammates, learning everything. And to be able to have these exhibition games not mean anything for your win-loss record, but still represent a live opponent with some kind of stakes, right? Not like win-loss stakes, but like a live opponent who can hit you and sack you and tackle you and touch you, unlike practice. And a live opponent who doesn't like you and really wants to make sure they win, as opposed to your teammates at practice. They'll be competitive, but it's a little bit different when they know you and your buddies, and they don't want to hurt you. They just want to help you get better. But there's something a little extra when it's a real opponent, and to be able to have an extra preseason game, 4 full preseason games that Caleb could use to get those snaps, to just practice live game situations that you just can't recreate at practice, could be really valuable. On the other hand, he is the number 1 overall pick, and these games don't matter. So does he need to be out there, risking injury and also putting some tape out there? I mean, not that teams are going to aggressively scout the Bears preseason to see Caleb's tendencies and stuff, but it's some tape for teams to prepare for Caleb and what your offense might look like with him. But more so, it's the injury risk, right? Does he need to be out there a bunch or at all versus backups in exhibition games that don't really matter? Does he really need the experience there, or can training camp and the practices throughout the offseason be enough that he'll be ready to go week 1 and that he doesn't really need to be doing a lot this preseason? To try and get to the bottom of this, I wanted to look back at how the Bears have used the quarterbacks the last couple of preseasons, but also how offensive coordinator Shane Waldron utilized his starting quarterbacks the last couple of preseasons, because he's going to have some say in this. The last couple of preseasons were Luke Getsy and Justin Fields, which is a different situation than Shane Waldron and Caleb Williams. And Shane Waldron in Seattle had Geno Smith the last 2 years and Russell Wilson before that, which are also, none of them are going to be one-to-one comparisons to say, okay, they did this in the past, so that means they're going to do the exact same thing this year. But I think it does give us a sense of how the Bears have thought about it and how Waldron has thought about it. And we can kind of then blend that together a little bit to come up with what a plan for Caleb Williams might look like. So you think back to last season, where with Justin Fields, played a tiny bit in the first preseason game, about 7 snaps. I think it was a drive or 2. They didn't play starters at all in the second preseason game, or most of the starters did not play at all in the second preseason game. 0 snaps for Fields in that game. But then they came back and had him play in the final preseason game. I think the second one was because they had done the joint practices with I was at the Colts last year, I think, and things had gone so well, they said, okay, we're good, we don't need the preseason game, but then had him play again in the third preseason game and made a couple of drives, I think, in that game. So, like, all in all, Fields didn't play that much, but it was year 2 with Luke Getsy, year 3 with the Bears, year 2 with a lot of the same teammates. There wasn't as much of a learning curve to catch up on. A lot was more established. Whereas 2 years ago, when Getsy and Eberflus first came in, Fields played a lot more as the starter throughout that preseason. 18 in the first game, 9 in the second game, 30 snaps in the third game. He played a lot in that third preseason game. If I remember correctly, I remember feeling like, what is he still doing out there? Get him out of this game. It's the third preseason game. Why is he still? He might have played the whole first half even. I can't remember for sure. It's been a little while. But that's kind of how the Bears approached it. Okay, year 1 with Fields in the new offense, he played a lot. Year 2 established in the offense, didn't play very much. That might lend itself to playing Caleb Williams quite a bit in the preseason, but Shane Waldron will have a say in this. So if we look back at like what he did with Geno Smith, similar type of story where last preseason, 2023, Geno and Waldron had worked together for a couple seasons now. It was already established, so Geno Smith hardly played a little bit in the second preseason game. That was it, but didn't play in the first or third preseason game. So just got a little bit of run, but not much. But 2022, Geno Smith, the first year Geno took over as the starter for Russell Wilson. So it was not his first year with Shane Waldron, but his first year as the starter. Waldron played Geno a lot that preseason, almost 30 snaps in each of the first 2 preseason games, and then lightened it up for the third one. But a very full starter's workload across the 3 preseason games for Geno Smith when he was in his first year as a starter. The one sort of exception here is that Waldron came to Seattle in 2021 with Russell Wilson being a veteran, established Super Bowl champion quarterback. Didn't play him at all during the preseason. But I don't think that is... I think that's more of an outlier here compared to where the Bears are with Williams, where both Eberflus and Shane Waldron, when it's been year 1 of quarterback in offense, they've played their quarterback a lot in the preseason. Whether it was Fields or Geno Smith, they got some significant playing time in the preseason. And with both quarterbacks, in year 2 of their offense and under the system, they cut the playing time down a lot. So I take that to expect that the Bears will play Caleb Williams a decent amount this preseason. How much that actually ends up being, we'll see. I mean, I would imagine, given that there are 4 preseason games instead of 3, I think he'll come out in the Hall of Fame game and do, a drive or so just to kind of get the feet wet. And then maybe in the second and third preseason games, he'll do a quarter or so, maybe even up to a full first half. Don't know why I couldn't get those words out. And then I think the 4th preseason game, they'll dial it down a little bit and kind of treat it like we used to treat the 4th preseason game, where Caleb maybe plays a drive or maybe doesn't play at all. I could see them saying, all right, if he plays in the first 3, he doesn't need to play in the 4th. Or you could go vice versa and not play him in the first one and then play him in the final 3. But I think I'd rather have him play sooner rather than later. Have him play the first 3 and then kind of let things go from there. The other question attached to this is, how many starters will Caleb actually be playing with out there? Because Caleb's a rookie, so, he want to get him some playing time, but some of the other veteran starters on this team don't really need to be playing preseason snaps. There's not a lot of value to some of these guys going out there, and what are they trying to prove something or show improvement or knock some rust off? Like, a lot of these veterans can go without playing in the preseason game. So we'll kind of check in on some of the newcomers to the Bears, the guys that came in as free agents or free a trade, who we haven't seen with the Bears in the preseason before, to know how the Bears will treat them. But we can kind of get a sense from their last season on how much or how little to expect from any of the newcoming veteran Bears players. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's number one sportsbook. And one of the things that makes FanDuel the number one sportsbook is that even when we're in this time of the summer, where there's not a lot of sports on your television every weekend, there's always a lot of ways to play on FanDuel. Like, of course, you can bet the sports that are on, baseball season. We got Copa America and the EuroLeagues and soccer right now. There's always tennis tournaments going on, and of course, racing sports as well. But with FanDuel, you can also bet plenty of futures on the upcoming football season. You can bet on the Week 1 line for Bears-Titans. You can bet on Matt Eberflus as Coach of the Year candidate, Rome Odunze's receiving yards, Caleb Williams' passing yards, odds for Offensive Rookie of the Year, and much, much more. And the best part is, this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long at FanDuel. So, To get your daily bonuses, head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So we expect to see Caleb Williams as a starter a decent amount this preseason. I don't know if it's going to be a ton, but a decent amount. I think we'll see, like I said, 3-ish games of appearances and a handful of drives in each of them. I think they want to get him some run without overexposing him too much. But that doesn't mean they're going to play all 11 starters on both sides of the ball the exact same amount with Caleb Williams. It's a little different because he's a rookie. You might say, oh, well, you either play all the starters together or you don't. But I think there is room for some exceptions in there. That obviously you want the chemistry and the cohesion of, make sure he's throwing to all of his receivers and has all of his offensive linemen in front of him. So like Caleb is getting all that experience, and same thing even on defense, right? Like to have all 11 guys getting used to playing off of each other and making sure that, especially for newer players in the organization, like what it's like to be teammates with them on the field against an opponent in live game situations. Now, that being said, some guys don't necessarily need it. And that if you're missing one guy here or a couple guys here and there, I don't think it's necessarily going to break the chemistry and the cohesion. And it's also not unlike the regular season where, a guy might be hurt and missing, and you know what? You just have to play without him and get used to him not being there. So there's something to be said too about, being flexible and being able to just kind of roll with it no matter who is in the lineup around you. I think it's especially important on the offensive line, and I don't foresee when you look at this Bears offensive line, there's not a Cody Whitehair veteran type that you might say, yeah, just sit him down. Although even then last year, Cody Whitehair, I think, played the exact same number of snaps in the preseason as like Tevin Jenkins. So like, it wasn't like Cody Whitehair was getting veteran preseason treatment either, but there isn't anyone to even put in that category, right? Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Ryan Bates, Nate Davis, Darnell Wright. I'd like them to all be playing at the same time, and I don't necessarily need any of them to be playing extra long, although we'll talk about some of the younger players here in a little bit. But outside of the O-line, you can pluck veterans out, and it's not going to be that big of a deal. And I think there are a handful across this roster. There's like 5 main ones that I don't think we'll see a ton of this preseason, but that doesn't necessarily mean 0 snaps either. So what I wanted to do was specifically look at some of the Bears newcomers, because, okay, like we saw last season, Jalen Johnson played a little bit in the first preseason game and the third preseason game, but they rested starters in the second. But like otherwise, he played the regular amount with starters. He's kind of one of the guys this year that I could see them saying, Jalen doesn't need preseason. Just play some of the younger corners. He's good. It's very, very well possible. Because I think most of the newcomers, the free agent signings and trade guys, I wouldn't expect to see much of them. So like, for example, Keenan Allen at wide receiver has not played a snap in the preseason since 2018. Like it's been, this will be 6 years then since he's stepped on the field in uniform for a preseason game. You could say, okay, well, now he's on a new team, new offense, new quarterback. Maybe this could be the time for him to get on the field, even just for a drive with Caleb Williams. And I guess I'd never say never. It's possible, but I would expect single-digit preseason snaps from Keenan Allen across all 4 preseason games because, again, has not played a single preseason snap since 2018. DeAndre Swift, sticking on the offense here, like the first free agent signing, is not one of these like veteran established players, who's been in the league for 10 years and, why would he need any of that preseason? Like he's only played 4 seasons, and last year was his first season as like the unquestioned number 1 back in an offense. And yet last year for the Eagles, he played 6 snaps in the first preseason game, and that was it. 6 total snaps all in the first preseason game. So like I would expect to see a little bit more of that this year. Although last year was his first year in Philly too, so it wasn't like he had been established on that team. I think we'll see a little bit more than that just to like really get the practice in for Caleb, even if it's just handoffs or checkdowns. But I don't think it's going to be much DeAndre Swift. Like maybe not even in the Hall of Fame game. I think we'll see a tiny bit of DeAndre Swift, but I think we will see Caleb Williams and some of the other starters play more than Swift because you can still give those snaps to Khalil Herbert, to Roschon Johnson, Travis Homer, etc. in the running back position. Gerald Everett at tight end, I'll mention as well, like kind of a free agent signing that hasn't gotten as much attention since then. He also didn't play a single snap in the preseason last year with the Chargers. Like he's a pretty established veteran. He's been in the league, 7 or 8 years now, I think. And it's not one of these unquestioned bona fide starter guys, but again, like he's 30. he's been like, does he need a lot of preseason time? Probably not. He didn't play any last year for the Chargers. I think he might. Wouldn't surprise me if we saw him on the field a little bit this preseason, but kind of like DeAndre Swift, right? Where it's like he plays a drive, so he's out there with Caleb, but otherwise, the bottom of the roster depth chart tight end guys can play, and it's not a big deal. Defensively, we actually haven't seen Montez Sweat with the Bears in the preseason yet. It feels like he's been here longer than, what has it been now, like 10 months? Because he came in October, so my month math is bad, 9 months, but it feels like he's been here longer than that, but he wasn't here for the preseason, so like this is his first preseason with the Bears. Last season with Washington, he played 8 snaps in the first preseason game and then none the rest of the preseason. Again, if I'm the Bears, I don't think I'd play Montez Sweat in the preseason at all. I mean, maybe a drive, but what value are you getting from putting Montez Sweat out there? Like, you're only risking injury. I don't think he needs the practice. I don't think he needs the reps. He doesn't need the rust to be knocked off. He's good. I wouldn't bother playing him. Maybe we'll see him a little bit, but don't get your hopes up there. And then Kevin Byard coming over as the veteran safety, I guess technically from the Eagles, but had spent most of his career with the Tennessee Titans. Last season, I guess he started the preseason, or he was on the Titans for the preseason, not traded till mid-year. And even in like year 10 with the Titans or whatever it was for Byard, he's been around the block quite a while. Year 8 for the Titans. They still played him a little bit in the preseason at age 30. So maybe we'll see Kevin Byard. He played in their 3rd preseason game. And of course, all these teams will kind of approach it a little bit differently as far as which game they might play him in and how much they might play him. But like, we could see Byard get a drive out there just to kind of get used to Brisker and Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon, if Jalen Johnson even plays. But I also don't necessarily think Kevin Byard needs preseason snaps either. I mean, none of these guys really do. They might give Allen and Swift a couple, and Everett, I suppose, just so they're out there with Caleb for a couple of plays. But at this point, any of these guys, and plus Jalen Johnson, they just really don't need the preseason snaps. They're just not really valuable enough to risk any kind of thing. Any player that doesn't need any kind of growth or development, like all those guys we mentioned, like if they don't need to get better really than they have been, they just need to keep being as good as they have been, or maybe get back to their peak if they're a little below their peak. But like, we're not expecting these guys to still, reach some kind of future prime or like hit some new mountaintop. Maybe DeAndre Swift, but like preseason snaps are not going to be the thing that gets DeAndre Swift to be the best running back he can be. You know what I mean? Like, and same with all these guys, like Kevin Byard, Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, Montez Sweat. Like, I don't think playing in the preseason is going to have an appreciable difference on their regular season, but certainly risking an injury would, right? And so the payoff here is not worth the reward as compared to some of the younger players on this roster who certainly, you can't afford an injury. Obviously, like, injury is not worth the reward, but like some of these guys could benefit from as many snaps and as much playing time as they can now in the preseason when it doesn't matter, so that they can have even more experience under their belt when it comes to the regular season. And there are some guys too where maybe their role isn't going to be very big in the regular season. Guys who are rotation guys off the bench who may only play a handful of snaps each game during the year, but in the preseason, you can give them quarters and halves and dozens and dozens and dozens of snaps that they're just not going to get in the regular season. So we'll look at some of the young players who should play the most, since we just talked about some of the veterans who should play the least, next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at BetterHelp. BetterHelp provides online therapy that's designed to match your schedule and be flexible and convenient whenever you need it. I cannot recommend doing online therapy enough. I do online therapy, and it's a really important part of my own personal mental health regimen. I like to compare it to going to the gym. I go to the gym because I want my body to be stronger, not because my body's broken or there's something wrong with it, but just to strengthen it and have it be its best. And I think of therapy as the exact same thing for my brain. It's not that my mental health is broken, but I want it to be as healthy as I can to be my best self. And BetterHelp is here to help you. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, it is a great place to give it a try. Stop trying to compare yourself to everything else in your life and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. The preseason should prove to be very valuable for some of the key young Bears that we need to see get better this season. And every rep is another opportunity for them to practice their technique, their assignment, their responsibilities and their communication, like every little thing in a setting that is better than practice, but doesn't have nearly as many stakes as a regular season game where a mistake can be the difference between winning and losing and et cetera, et cetera. Like losing the preseason game doesn't matter all that much. But there are different categories, I think, for the young players on this roster. Like you might think, oh, well, Darnell Wright in year 2 as a first-round pick. I mean, he's 22 years old, turns 23 in August, but like still 22 years old. He could use some more playing time, right? I mean, he's a young player, play him, but I don't think the Bears are going to take that approach with Wright or Braxton Jones, who's also a young player, both players that we do want to see continue to develop. But I think with this offensive line in particular, like they're going to keep those 5 starters together, play them with the regular starters, and then, when Cole Kmet comes off the field, I think the rest of the offensive line is going to come off the field. And maybe when Caleb does too, maybe that'll all be synced together. But we didn't see last year, even with Braxton Jones, he still only played like the regular amount as the starters. He didn't get extra snaps just because he was a younger offensive lineman. They just said, no, we trust you're established as our starting offensive tackle. We're giving you the starters minutes and we're just rolling that way. So don't expect Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones, for example, to kind of get extended playing time in that regard. And I would throw, Brisker, Gordon, and Tyreek Stevenson in that same category. Tyreek Stevenson played like the most snaps of any Bears defensive player last season in the preseason. They played Tyreek a bunch as a rookie. Year 2, I think they're going to say, no, you'll come out for the starters. We'll play some of our other younger cornerbacks. Like, Terrell Smith, for example, I think is somebody I'd like to see get a lot of preseason run because he's like your number 1 corner off the bench, and give him the action now because hopefully he won't need to play much at all during the regular season. Same thing with like Elijah Hicks at free safety. Like when Byard's not out there, play Hicks. I mean, he's your top backup free safety, and I don't super trust him if he needs to start. Like if Byard got hurt or something and Hicks was thrown in the starting lineup. We've seen that a little bit in the past, and it's not great. So, but get him more reps to get him as good as you can. Like absolutely, I want to see a lot of Elijah Hicks this preseason, and not then Kevin Byard as a result. And like across this defense, like I don't think we'll see a ton of Edmonds and Edwards, but play Noah Sewell, play Jack Sanborn. Like let's see those linebackers continue to develop on the bench, because eventually, not right away, but a couple years down the line, maybe Edmonds or Edwards moves on. You know what I mean? Like these guys aren't going to be here forever, and if you can kind of keep developing these guys behind them, like that's a great way to move things. But really, it's the defensive line. I don't think we'll see Sweat much, but I want to see a 4-man defensive line from left to right. I want to see this the most of any defensive line this preseason. Austin Booker at defensive end on one side, Dominique Robinson at defensive end on the other side. Play those guys every snap you possibly can. They're raw, they're young, they're athletic. They need to refine their technique. They need as much on-field experience and practice as they possibly can. And then a defensive tackle, I want to see a lot of Gervon Dexter and a lot of Zach Pickens. I know they got a couple undrafted guys that you'd like to see at the defensive tackle spot, and certainly, you don't play every snap for just those 2 defensive tackles, but Pickens and Dexter need work. And I know there's an injury risk there, and I know that you're counting on them in the regular season as well, but like Dexter especially, I want him on the field for a lot of the preseason. Let Andrew Billings take it off. I don't need to see Andrew Billings out there. I don't need to see Montez Sweat out there. DeMarcus Walker, is the preseason going to make a big difference for him? He's kind of established at this point. I mean, I don't know. I don't think he's so good that you give him the preseason off, but like, I don't think he needs it either. So I don't know, but definitely a lot of Dexter and Pickens and Robinson and Booker across that defensive line. I want to see other defensive linemen out there too, but like those 4 to me are the pivotal 4 to give them as much run as possible to help this defensive line be as ready as it can be for the start of the regular season. Offensively, it's really the rookies and second-year guys that I want to see. I want to see a lot of Rome Odunze. Like we know how good Rome Odunze is, but we know that DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are going to get the lion's share of the snaps and the catches and the targets this season. Odunze is going to have a role and probably have a lot of yards and stuff, but like he's always going to be third fiddle to those guys. So in the preseason, when we're not going to see much of Keenan Allen at all, and probably not much of DJ Moore at all, keep Odunze out there and keep Tyler Scott out there. Like I want to see Odunze and Scott play a lot this preseason, especially Tyler Scott, because he's getting buried more and more farther down that depth chart there. So I'd love to see those 2 guys, whether it's Caleb or Tyson Bagent or whoever throwing it to him, like just keep them out there running routes and getting some more experience under their belt, because it's going to be the DJ Moore and Keenan Allen show quite a bit this season. And Odunze will get his, but it's not going to be nearly as big of a role as we anticipate farther down the line. I also really want to see Karan Amagaji, your 3rd-round pick from Yale, get healthy, and be ready to go in the preseason. And the moment your starting offensive linemen come off the field, I want Amagaji on the field every other snap the rest of that game. Whether it's at left tackle or right guard or wherever you want to put him, maybe even have him play multiple spots. Say, okay, you'll play the rest of the first half at left tackle, and then play the second half at right guard, or however you want, or left guard, or however you want to do it. But like, when you have a raw offensive line prospect who has already missed all of the offseason program so far due to injury, assuming he's healthy for training camp, which they have said is the plan and the expectation and the hope, then he'll be ready for the preseason games and preseason 1 through 4. Again, when the starters, I don't want him taking starters spots, right? Play the starters however much you're going to play them. When you take them off, I want Amagaji at one of those 5 spots every snap for the rest of the game. Like, if you don't want him to take all the left tackle spots because you want to play someone else at left tackle and give somebody else some reps there, that's cool. Then move him to another spot and take somebody else out of the lineup, because I want Amagaji playing and developing and growing as much as he can. I would have, even if he had played had practiced in the offseason. But the fact that he's already so far behind, like, give me every extra rep he can possibly get at practice or a preseason game to get that development rolling and see if this third-round pick can pan out. Try and get something out of that. Maybe not right away this season, but accelerate that development as much as possible. I'll also throw Roschon Johnson in this conversation. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the, I think, relatively unwarranted speculation about Khalil Herbert's job security, but like, Roschon's the young back in this backfield, a young back who role should expand after this season, if not during this season, more and more. Give him the reps. Like, Herbert doesn't need him, and Travis Homer doesn't really need him. They have the undrafted rookie free agent Ian Wheeler that they signed out of Howard, kind of a small school back. But like, give him to Roschon Johnson. Like, let him get some run. Like, keep him fresh. Like, let's go. Like, keep him not fresh, but keep him like well oiled up to speed, ready to go for the regular season. Because I think there's no point in hiding or protecting him. You got running back depth right now. Play the young kid, and let's see if he can keep getting better and help that be the beginning of him growing into eventually Khalil Herbert's full-time replacement, and the top backup to DeAndre Swift, and maybe eventually the starter when DeAndre Swift moves on, a couple years down the line. Again, getting ahead of ourselves, but like, it's these reps in the preseason, in training camp, and in OTAs. You start stacking those year after year after year, and the amount of reps he's gone through go from a couple hundred to a couple thousand to 10,000 after a couple seasons, of practice. And then, that's when you really become great at something. And I know each individual rep probably doesn't amount to much in a vacuum, but add them up and take every preseason snap you can for all these young guys, especially all the guys we talked about on defense, but certainly some of these key young skill position player guys too. I am a little curious how much they give Tyson Bagent. That's a name we haven't mentioned much yet up to this point. He is your top backup quarterback. He's also a second-year player. So, like, once you take Caleb out, do you run Bagent most of the rest of the time? Is it worth giving playing time to Brett Ripien and the undrafted free agent Austin Reed? Or, like, is Bagent going to get the most benefit? Because it's a new offense for him, too. Like, I'd like to see a decent amount of Tyson Bagent this preseason, but I don't know that you get a lot of value from playing Brett Ripien, but Austin Reed, as an undrafted free agent, like, I'd give him some run, too, just to see if you got anything there. But I think Ripien at this stage of his career as your number 3 quarterback, like, I don't think he's going to all of a sudden become something great. He's a, slightly more experienced guy in the room, but I'm not expecting him to have some lighted up preseason and make you reconsider your backup quarterback situation. So, like, I don't see a lot of value in, I don't want to use the word wasting preseason reps with him, but like, I think your preseason reps are most valuable for Bagent and Austin Reed as backups to Caleb Williams, they're also valuable for him. Like, Brett Ripien, the preseason snaps are the least valuable for Brett Ripien compared to the other 3 quarterbacks on this roster. So I hope they don't dedicate a ton of playing time to him in this preseason. I'm sure he's a fine guy or whatever, and there's a value to having him in the depth chart and in the quarterback room, I guess. But like, Bagent and Reed, give them the snaps, make sure you can see more of what you got with them, and of course Caleb Williams at the beginning, and everything else should fall in the line. So that's how I predict this Bears preseason plan will look. I imagine when training camp rolls around, we'll get a more definitive answer from Matt Eberflus about how the Bears are going to handle this. And you can be sure that when we do, we'll break it all down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Really appreciate you making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. I filled in as one of the hosts this week with Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans. Tyler Rowland. I don't think you pronounced the W. Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans. That'll be coming up as the July 2nd, Tuesday morning podcast here on Locked On NFL, where we put NFL teams both in the NFC and the AFC into tiers. You know, we think about like how they're going to compete for playoff spots. The Bears, higher up than you might think. Definitely on the verge of the higher end of the tiers in the NFC. We talked through that and every other team and which teams could move up or down as the season goes. So check out the Locked On NFL podcast with me and Tyler Rowland, wherever you get your podcasts, or on the Locked On NFL YouTube channel. We're still in a little bit of a slower time of the year for here on Locked On Bears. Still more like 3-ish podcasts a week, but we're only a couple weeks away from training camp, and then we'll be ramped up to back to a full 5 days a week, making sure that every day you get another opportunity to bear down.